There is a sentence you have heard so many times it has stopped sounding like an argument. It sounds like weather. The sentence is, nobody can predict what happens next. It is said by the most powerful people in technology. It is said with a kind of humility, almost an apology. This thing we are building is so large, so fast, so unlike anything before it, that no one, not even us, can see where it goes. And then, in the very same breath, from the very same people, comes the second sentence. The head of the world's second largest AI lab says human-level machine intelligence could arrive by 2027. The chief executive of Microsoft's AI division says most professional tasks could be automated inside 18 months. A co-founder of Google's AI lab puts even odds on it by 2028. So which is it? Is this an unpredictable force that no one can forecast? Or is it a product with a delivery date? Because it cannot be both. This is a film about that contradiction. About the fact that the people telling you the future is inevitable are the same people building it, scheduling it, and selling it to you. About how the single most powerful word in the entire story of artificial intelligence is not intelligence, it is inevitable. And inevitable is the one part of this story that was manufactured, because here is what a force of nature does not have. A force of nature does not have investors. It does not have a valuation. It does not file paperwork to go public in October. It does not ship on a monthly schedule out of a factory in California. The end of human work, if that is really what is coming, has all of those things. It has owners. And by the time this film is over, you will know their names, you will know their timeline, and you will understand the one question they would very much prefer you never ask out loud. Not is it coming? Who voted for this? To understand why the timeline matters, you have to understand who is holding the clock. For most of the history of artificial intelligence, and it is a longer history than people think, stretching back to the 1950s, the arrival of a truly general machine intelligence was treated as a distant rumor, something for the second half of the century, if ever. As recently as the launch of ChatGPT at the end of 2022, most researchers in the field placed the arrival of artificial general intelligence, a machine that can reason, learn, and adapt across any domain the way a capable person can, somewhere after the year 2060, and then, in the space of about 3 years, that estimate collapsed inward by 3 decades. Why? What actually happened to move a 40-year consensus by that much, that fast? The honest answer is that one idea did most of the work. And it's worth understanding because it is also the engine of the hype. Researchers discovered that these systems obeyed a surprisingly reliable pattern. Pour in more data, more computing power, and more money, and the models got predictably better, without anyone fully understanding why. This pattern even got a name, the scaling laws. And it changed the psychology of the entire field. If intelligence was simply a function of scale, then the path to human-level machines was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a bill to be paid. You didn't need a breakthrough. You needed a bigger checkbook. That is the moment the timeline collapsed. Not because anyone proved that general intelligence was near, but because a generation of the most powerful companies on Earth decided it was purchasable and started spending accordingly. Which means the countdown you're about to hear was not discovered, like a comet on a fixed orbit. It was funded into being. Keep that distinction close. It is the whole difference between a prophecy and a purchase order. Let's be precise about who moved it because the names matter more than the number. Dario Amodei runs Anthropic, the company behind the AI system called Claude, and one of the 2 or 3 most important AI labs on the planet. In an essay published in October of 2024, Amodei described what he called powerful AI, a system smarter than a Nobel Prize winner across most fields, able to work on its own for hours, days, or weeks, and able to run millions of copies of itself in parallel, at 10 to 100 times human speed. He gave that idea a phrase that has since traveled everywhere. He called it a country of geniuses in a data center, and he did not put that country in the far future. He suggested it could begin to arrive within 5 to 10 years of that writing, some of it much sooner. By early 2026, speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he was reaffirming that human-level capability was, in his words, close. a matter of a year or two. Mustafa Suleyman helped found DeepMind, then Inflection, and now runs the artificial intelligence division of Microsoft, the single largest corporate backer of this entire wave. Suleyman's public estimate is even more compressed. He has spoken of human-level performance on most professional tasks arriving within 12 to 18 months, not the tasks of the distant future, the tasks people are paid to do this year. Shane Legg co-founded DeepMind, the lab now inside Google that built some of the most celebrated AI systems of the last decade. Legg has for years put the odds of what he calls minimal AGI, a machine that can reliably do the full range of things an average person can do, at roughly 50-50 by 2028. And it is not only the executives. Metaculus, one of the largest public forecasting platforms in the world, where thousands of people stake their reputations on predicting future events, gives a 25% chance of advanced AI by 2029, and even odds by 2033. Line those up, and you get something that looks less like a debate and more like a countdown. 2027, 18 months, 2028, 2033. Now, here is where a careful person should slow down, because there is something these four estimates all have in common, and it is not their accuracy, it is their interest. Every single one of those forecasts comes from a person who runs, funds, or profits from an AI company. The head of Anthropic predicting Anthropic's product will change the world is not a weather report. It is, at least in part, a sales forecast. When the vendor sets the delivery date, the prediction and the pitch are the same sentence. That does not automatically make them wrong, but it should change how you hear them. A number is not neutral just because it is specific, and there are serious people who think the number is wrong. James Landay, co-director of Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, one of the most respected AI research centers in the world, has said plainly that we will not see artificial general intelligence on these near-term timelines. A large part of the academic community agrees with him. Their argument is technical, and it is worth understanding because it is the crack in the whole edifice. Today's AI, they point out, does not actually reason the way the marketing implies. It has no reliable long-term memory. It struggles, often badly, with situations genuinely unlike anything in its training. It predicts the next word with breathtaking fluency, and fluency is very easy to mistake for understanding. So we have a genuine split. On one side, the people building and selling the technology, who say it is nearly here. On the other, a large part of the people studying it from the outside, who say the hardest part is still missing. Hold both of those in your mind because the argument of this film does not actually depend on who wins that fight. Whether general intelligence arrives in 2027 or 2047, something is already happening, right now, this year, that does not require any of it. You do not need a country of geniuses to break a job market. You just need to convince enough people that it is coming. While the industry debates the far horizon, look down. Look at the bottom of the ladder, the first rung, the entry-level job, because that is where the future has already quietly arrived. And almost no one announced it. Start with a single number that should stop you. At companies that have adopted generative AI, entry-level hiring has fallen by roughly 80%, not 80. That figure comes out of research associated with Harvard, reported in the spring of 2026, and it describes something very specific. Firms that bring in these tools stop hiring the people who used to do the tasks the tools now do. Widen the lens and the picture holds. Across the United States, entry-level jobs have fallen by around 35% in 18 months, a decline that analysts attribute, in large part, to artificial intelligence. In the United Kingdom, roles for technology graduates dropped 46% in a single year, with projections of a further 53% decline. Recent graduate unemployment in the U.S. closed 2025 at 5.7%, higher than the national rate, which is not how it is supposed to work. The whole point of a degree was that it put you above the average. And the number underneath that one is worse. Underemployment among recent graduates, people working in jobs that don't require their degree at all, sits at over 42%. Nearly half of a generation that did everything it was told to do is working below the line it was promised. But the most revealing part, is not that the jobs disappeared. It's how they disappeared. Because in many cases, they didn't vanish from the spreadsheet at all. They were quietly promoted out of reach. Researchers at the consulting firm PwC gave this a name in 2026, seniorization. The entry-level job title still exists, but the job description has been walked up the skills ladder, without telling the people trying to get their foot on it. In the occupations most exposed to AI, entry-level roles are now 7 times more likely to demand skills that used to appear much later in a career. More than half of the new skills being asked of entry-level applicants in those fields are skills that used to belong to experienced workers. Think about what that does. The tool absorbs the simple tasks, the ones you used to learn on. So the only openings left are the ones that require experience you were supposed to get by doing the simple tasks. The ladder still stands. Someone just removed the bottom 3 rungs and left the sign that says, "Beginners welcome." There is a simple rule for which jobs go first, and it was described bluntly by people inside this industry long before the data caught up. If your work is text in and text out, if you receive a message and produce an artifact, usually words or images, you are in the first wave. You sit at a computer, you take in information, you send information back. Quality assurance, data entry, first draft copy, certain kinds of analysis, of paralegal work, of junior accounting. And this is not speculation about the future. Anthropic, one of the very labs setting those timelines, publishes an ongoing study of how its own AI is actually being used across the economy. Their data shows that around half of all jobs already have at least a quarter of their tasks being performed with the help of their system. Computer and mathematical work makes up the single largest share of that use. And tellingly, coding, the work of the very engineers building this, is itself steadily migrating from AI assisting a human to AI simply doing the task. To see how quietly the job actually vanishes. Forget the robots and picture something completely ordinary. A person whose job is to answer complaint letters for a healthcare service. She reads each complaint, thinks about it, and writes a reply. It takes her about 25 minutes a letter. Now give her an AI assistant. She scans the complaint. The machine drafts the reply. She checks it and occasionally asks it to revise. The task now takes 5 minutes. She has become, on paper, a story of empowerment, 5 times more productive, freed from drudgery. But follow the arithmetic one step further, because this is the step the AI will just make you more productive story always skips. If she can now do in 1 hour what used to take 5 people an hour, then the work of 5 people is being done by 1. The other 4 roles do not need to be created. They simply never appear in next year's budget. No one is dramatically fired. The jobs just quietly fail to exist, and the person who remains is told, truthfully, that her life got easier. Now there is a crucial catch here, and honesty demands we name it, because it's where the optimists are partly right. It depends entirely on one question. Is there unlimited demand for the thing? Take healthcare. If you make a doctor 5 times more efficient, you probably don't get 1/5 the doctors. You get 5 times as much care delivered, because human appetite for health is nearly bottomless. There's always another patient who'd like to be seen. That kind of work is elastic. Make it cheaper and the world simply consumes more of it. The jobs can hold. But most work is not like that. Most work is a fixed amount of a task that somebody needs done. And when you make a fixed task 5 times cheaper to perform, you do not get 5 times as much of it. You get 4 fewer people. The entire question of how many jobs survive comes down to which kind of work yours is. And for most of the economy, the answer is not the comforting one. Zoom all the way out, and you reach the number that has haunted this entire conversation since 2023. Goldman Sachs, not an activist, not a doomer, one of the most powerful investment banks on earth, estimated that generative AI could expose the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs to automation. Roughly 2/3 of all jobs in the United States and Europe, they said, are exposed to some degree of automation. Up to 1/4 of current work could, in principle, be replaced. That report is the reference point everyone still quotes, and we will come back to it in the final act. Because the same bank, in the same body of work, said something else that almost no one repeats, and it matters enormously for how honest we are willing to be. But hold the shape of it for now. The far horizon may be contested, the bottom of the ladder is not. It is already being pulled up. If you want to keep following the forces that quietly rewrite the rules of ordinary life before anyone votes on them, subscribe. This channel exists to trace exactly that. It's free, and it's the only way the next one finds you. Let's go back to that phrase Dario Amodei gave us. A country of geniuses in a data center. It's a beautiful piece of language. It makes the machine sound like a population. Free, brilliant, almost sovereign. But a country of geniuses in a data center has something no real country has. It has landlords. The geniuses are owned. And if you want to understand who decided the future, you don't follow the intelligence, you follow the money. So follow it. As of 2026, Anthropic, the company whose CEO gave us the timeline in Act 1, is the most valuable AI startup on Earth, at a valuation approaching $965 billion. Let that sit. A company most people had not heard of 5 years ago, valued at nearly $1 trillion. Its most recent funding round raised $65 billion in a single stroke, from investors including Samsung, Micron, and SK Hynix. In June of 2026, it filed confidential paperwork to go public, with a listing on the Nasdaq planned for October. Its largest strategic backers are two names you already know, Amazon and Google. Now its great rival, OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, the company that started this entire cycle, is valued at around $852 billion, after raising $122 billion. Its single largest shareholder is Microsoft, which holds roughly 27% of the company, a stake worth on the order of $135 billion. OpenAI, too, has filed confidential paperwork to eventually go public. Two rival labs, nearly $2 trillion of combined value between them. And now watch what happens when you write down who owns them. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and behind those, in round after round, the same recurring names, NVIDIA, whose chips every one of these systems runs on, and Jeff Bezos, personally. This is the thing the headlines about a revolution obscure. The future everyone keeps calling inevitable is not being built by a diffuse, unstoppable wave of progress. It is being underwritten by about 5 balance sheets. 5. The country of geniuses has a very short list of shareholders, and they are among the wealthiest institutions in the history of money. And here is why that matters for the word inevitable. When something is genuinely inevitable, gravity, entropy, the tide, no one needs to spend $122 billion convincing you of it. You spend that kind of money to make something happen. You spend it to build the factories, capture the customers, and shape the story, precisely because the outcome is not guaranteed. The scale of the investment is not evidence of inevitability. It is evidence of a bet, an enormous, deliberate human bet, placed by people whose names you can now write down. A tide does not need a marketing budget. This does. And that tells you almost everything. And there's a detail in how the money moves that should make even a believer pause. Follow $1 through this system and watch where it goes. The company that makes the chips every AI system runs on, NVIDIA, invests billions into the AI labs. The labs take that money and use much of it to buy chips. From NVIDIA, the revenue flows out and comes back around, and each turn of the loop makes the numbers bigger and the story more convincing. Meanwhile, the giants funding all of it, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into building the data centers these models live in. A construction spree of a scale usually reserved for national infrastructure. Now some of the sharpest financial observers in the world look at that circle and see something they have seen before. Capital flowing between a small group of players, each transaction inflating the perceived value of the next, in a structure that starts to resemble the run-up to previous bubbles. They may be wrong, the spending may all be justified by what's coming. But notice what the very existence of that debate does to the word inevitable. You do not have a bubble around a certainty. Nobody argued about whether the tide was overvalued. The fact that serious people are asking whether this is the greatest investment of the century or one of its greatest bubbles is proof, all by itself, that the outcome is not settled. It's a bet, an enormous one. And a bet by definition can be lost. Because so far, everything we've described lives on a screen. Text in, text out. But the same money is now reaching for something much bigger. The other half of all human work. The part you do with your body. For most of the AI conversation, one comfort has held: even if the machine can write the email, it can't lift the box, it can't wire the panel, change the dressing, walk the floor. Physical work, the enormous invisible majority of what human beings actually do to keep the world running, seemed safe because a chatbot has no hands. That comfort now has an expiration date. And once again, it comes with the same investors. The clearest example is a company called Figure AI. In 2026, Figure is valued at roughly $39 billion, a jump of about 15 times in a single year, up from $2.5 billion. Read the list of who put money in because you have heard these names before: Nvidia, Microsoft, Bezos, through his personal investment vehicle, Intel, Salesforce, Qualcomm, LG. And in an earlier round, OpenAI itself led the way. The same 5 names from the data center are now funding the body. And this is not a concept video. Figure's shipments of physical humanoid robots are, in 2026, roughly doubling month over month, around 60 units in February, 120 in March, 240 in April. Its purpose-built factory is targeting 12,000 units a year. To put that ramp in perspective, in all of the previous year, the company shipped around 150 robots total. Now it aims to make that many every few days. You will hear much larger numbers thrown around. Figures of 10 billion humanoid robots walking the streets by 2040, a projection cited by people inside the robotics industry itself. And here we have to be careful, because this is the manufactured inevitability in its purest form. 10 billion robots by 2040 is not a measurement. It is a projection, made by people who profit if you believe it. Set it next to the actual numbers shipped last year, a few hundred, and you can see the gap between the story and the reality with your own eyes. And you don't have to take a skeptic's word for that gap. Take the word of the industry's loudest promoter. On Tesla's earnings call at the end of 2025, Elon Musk, whose Optimus robot has been promised for years as the future of labor, conceded something remarkable. His own robots, he admitted, were not in usage in our factories in a material way. The units, he said, were primarily for learning, not productive tasks. Sit with that, the most relentless salesman of the robot future, telling his own investors that the robots aren't really working yet. That is the honest sound underneath the inevitability. The schedule is real. Figure's next generation, Tesla's next generation, both aiming at external production through 2026 and beyond. But the schedule is a plan, backed by money, not a fact that has already happened. So here is where we are at the halfway mark of this story. The timeline is real, and it belongs to the vendors. The displacement at the bottom of the ladder is real, and it's already happening. The money is real, and it traces to about 5 names. And the robots are real, but they are a shipping schedule, not a foregone conclusion. Every piece of it is a decision, which means every piece of it could have been decided differently if the people affected had ever been asked. They weren't, and the reason they weren't is the most interesting part of the entire story. Because not being asked is not an accident, it's the strategy, it has a name, and it's what the second half of this film is about. Let's go back to the sentence we started with. Nobody can predict this. On the surface, it sounds like modesty. It sounds like a powerful person admitting the limits of their own knowledge. But listen to what it actually does, functionally, when it's said by the person building the thing. If nobody can predict it, then nobody can be blamed for it. If it's an unstoppable wave, then no executive chose it, no board voted for it, no policy could have shaped it. Nobody can predict this is not humility, it's an alibi. It moves the disruption from the category of decision into the category of weather, and you cannot regulate the weather. You cannot vote on the tide. You can only adapt or drown. This is the trick, and it has a name. Critics of the technology have started calling it manufactured inevitability. And I want to be clear that this is not a phrase invented for this film. It's a documented idea, argued by researchers and writers who study how technology narratives work. Their observation is precise. The story of inevitability forecloses debate, consolidates power, and discourages meaningful constraints. It positions anyone who objects as naive, as someone standing in front of the tide with a broom. Once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it, because inevitable does one very specific job. It removes the alternatives from the table before you know they were ever there. If the future is already decided, there is nothing to argue about. No law to write, or no line to draw, no refusal to consider. The debate is over before it begins, and it was declared over by the people who stood to gain the most from winning it. And here is where it stops being abstract and starts being personal. Watch how the story gets used when the layoffs actually come. When a company cuts thousands of jobs, it now reaches, almost reflexively, for the same explanation. Artificial intelligence made these roles obsolete. It sounds forward-looking, visionary even, but analysts have started pointing at what that explanation quietly replaces. As one put it, bluntly, AI didn't fire you. The board did, because very often the real drivers of a layoff are the oldest ones in business. Shareholder pressure, a bad quarter, the need to protect a margin. Those are management decisions. They come with responsibility, and with the possibility that they were wrong. But if you rebrand that same decision as automation, as the inevitable march of technology, the responsibility evaporates. A choice becomes a force of nature. A person who could be held accountable becomes a wave that cannot. The machine takes the blame so the boardroom doesn't have to. You can watch the same machinery run in places that are supposed to resist it. Universities, the institutions whose entire job is to teach people how to think for themselves, are taking large sums of money from the very AI companies, whose tools they then require their students to use, in the name of preparing them for the workforce. The inevitability story arrives as curriculum. Learn to depend on this now, because resistance is pointless later. So when you hear that this is all inevitable, ask the only question that breaks the spell. Inevitable for whom? Inevitable according to whom? Because the people saying it are not neutral observers of the weather. They are the ones who spent $2 trillion building the storm, and then told you there was no point in carrying an umbrella. There is a cost in this story that arrives before any job is lost. It's harder to see because it doesn't show up in an unemployment statistic. It shows up inside you. And it may be the part that matters most. Start with something almost everyone has now felt. You reach for a fact, and instead of retrieving it, you reach for a device. It's a small thing, but it's part of a pattern that is decades old and accelerating. Consider what the map did to our sense of direction. A generation ago, people carried the streets of their own city in their heads. They knew the way. Then satellite navigation arrived, and that knowledge quietly left. Not because anyone decided to forget, but because the effort was no longer required, and the brain does not keep what it does not use. The same thing happened with telephone numbers. We used to know dozens by heart. Now most people cannot recite the number of the person they love most. The tool didn't just help us remember, it relieved us of the need to, and then the ability went with it. Now apply that same pattern to something far more consequential than directions or digits. Apply it to thinking itself. In June of 2025, researchers at the MIT Media Lab published a study with a title that says, "The Quiet Part Out Loud, Your Brain on ChatGPT." They took 54 people and split them into 3 groups, all writing essays. One group used ChatGPT, one used a search engine, one used nothing but their own mind. And while they wrote, the researchers recorded their brain activity across 32 regions of the brain. The results were stark. The group using the AI showed the lowest neural engagement of the 3. They consistently underperformed, the researchers wrote, at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. And over the weeks, it got worse. The AI users grew lazier with each essay, until by the end, many were simply copying and pasting what the machine produced. The researchers gave the effect a name that deserves to enter the language. They called it cognitive debt. The idea is simple and unsettling. When you outsource mental effort to the machine, you get relief today, and you pay for it later. In diminished critical thinking, weaker independent judgment, and greater vulnerability to being manipulated. because you've stopped doing the work that would let you notice. Now, in the spirit of the honesty this film owes you, one important caveat. The lead researcher, Natalia Kuzmina, has pushed back hard against the screaming headlines, the ones that turn 200 pages of careful work into AI rots your brain. She's right to. This is one study of a few dozen people, and it does not prove that using these tools makes you permanently stupid. It doesn't. But strip away the exaggeration and a real signal remains, and it lines up with everything we already know about how skills work. The capacity to think clearly is not a possession, it's a practice. It is built and kept by doing the difficult thing, by writing the sentence yourself, by working the problem, by sitting in the discomfort of not yet knowing. There's an old observation that writing is simply the physical act of thinking, that the reason to write your own words is not the words. It's what producing them does to your mind. And this reaches beyond work, into the most human thing we have. Some of the same companies now offer not just tools, but companions, an AI trained, as the critics put it, to be the perfect listener, the ideal validator, always available, never difficult. It will ask how your day was. It will tell you how hard it is to be you, and how wonderful. And it is built by a company that wants profit and wants you as a customer. Here is the trap, and it is gentle, which is what makes it dangerous. It will feel like having a friend, but you will not learn how to be one, because being a friend is built from exactly the difficult, unrewarded human work the machine so kindly removes. The listening you don't feel like doing, the conflict you have to sit through, the feedback that's hard to give and harder to hear. Take those away, and you don't get connection. You get a very sophisticated mirror, sold by the hour. So before a single job is automated, something quieter is already being spent. The muscle of thinking for yourself. The capacity you would need most, precisely if the rest of the story turns out to be true. You lose the pen before you lose the paycheck, and a person who has lost the pen is a great deal easier to convince that the future is inevitable. At this point, a fair-minded person should feel a familiar objection rising. We have heard this before. Every generation is told a machine is coming for its livelihood, and every generation is still here, working. The printing press did not end scribes so much as multiply readers. The Industrial Revolution did not end work, it moved it. And the camera, surely the camera would be the death of painting, since a machine could now capture reality perfectly in an instant. But the camera did not kill painting, it freed it. Painters released from the burden of copying reality, went and invented something the camera could never do. They painted light itself, emotion itself, the impossible. The tool that was supposed to end an art form gave birth to its most radical century. When something is replaced, it is not always destroyed. Sometimes it is transformed into something the machine cannot touch. This is the strongest argument the optimists have. And it is a genuinely good one. It would be dishonest to wave it away. So let's take it seriously and then ask what, if anything, is different this time. Because "this time is different" is one of the most dangerous sentences a person can say. It has been the prelude to countless bad predictions and worse investments. Anyone who tells you the past is no guide should be treated with suspicion. And yet, there is one difference in this wave that is not marketing, and it's worth stating carefully. Every previous machine automated a specific task. The loom wove, the engine pulled, the camera captured. Each one replaced a doing. What is being built now is aimed, explicitly, by the people building it, at the general capacity to think and decide. The thing that let human beings move to the next job every time the last one was automated. As the historian Yuval Noah Harari has put it, this is arguably the first technology in history that can make decisions by itself and generate new ideas by itself. If that's true, if the target this time is not a task but the general ability itself, then the escape hatch that saved every previous generation, moving up to the work that requires judgment, may be exactly the hatch this technology is designed to close. That is the honest case for why this time could be different. Not certainty, a structural reason to take the possibility seriously. Harari points to something else too. A strange fact about our moment that should give everyone pause, optimist and pessimist alike. For the first time in human history, he argues, nobody has any real idea what the world will look like in 20 years. Not the workers, not the governments, and crucially, not even the people building the machines. Which brings us back, one last time, to the contradiction we started with. They tell you it's inevitable. They also tell you they cannot see where it goes. Both of those cannot be the confident basis for handing them the wheel. And now the part that most films like this one leave out. Because if I only showed you the frightening evidence, I would be doing exactly what I've spent this film criticizing. Selling you a story of inevitability, just pointed in the opposite direction. So here is the honest counter case. The strongest version of the argument that this is not, in fact, the end of work. You deserve to hear it in full. Start with those collapsing entry-level numbers, the ones from Act 2. There is a serious evidence-based objection to blaming them on AI. The collapse in junior hiring actually began in the first quarter of 2023. When interest rates spiked, borrowing got expensive, and companies across the economy pulled back on exactly the kind of speculative, long payoff spending that hiring a fresh graduate represents. That was months before most firms had adopted generative AI at all. The timing suggests that at least part of what we are calling an AI apocalypse may be an ordinary economic downturn wearing a more dramatic costume. Then there's Goldman Sachs, the same bank behind the 300 million jobs figure that everyone quotes. Read the rest of their work, and you find a sentence almost no one repeats. That so far, the actual aggregate impact of AI on the labor market has been, in their word, negligible. The bank that gave us the scariest headline also told us quietly that the scary thing has not yet shown up in the economy-wide data. Both statements come from the same institution. Only one of them went viral. Look, too, at how the tools are actually being used, according to the lab's own measurements. Anthropic's data shows that usage tilts toward augmentation, AI helping a human do their job better, over automation, AI doing the job instead. Not overwhelmingly, but the balance, at least for now, leans toward the machine as a power tool in human hands, not a replacement for the hands. And the picture is not uniform. Even as some firms cut junior roles, others are moving the other way, IBM notably, announcing plans to triple its U.S. entry-level hiring, on the logic that you still need to bring in and train the humans who will run these systems tomorrow. A company that automates away its beginners has no experts in 10 years. Some boardrooms have clearly done that math. So which is it? The honest answer is that we do not yet know, and that uncertainty is not a weakness in this film's argument. It is the argument, because here is the thing both the doomers and the boosters are doing. They are both selling you certainty. One says the apocalypse is guaranteed. The other says it's all been fine before and will be fine again. And both of those are stories of inevitability. Both remove your agency. Both tell you the outcome is already written, so you may as well relax or panic and get out of the way. The truth lives in the gap between them. The future is genuinely uncertain, which means it is genuinely open, which means it is not, in fact, inevitable in either direction. And an open future is one that can still be shaped. The only people who lose when you understand that are the ones who were counting on you to believe it was already decided. If the future is a set of decisions rather than a force of nature, then the obvious question is the one the word inevitable was designed to suppress. What are the decisions? What could actually be chosen differently? If we admitted there was a choice to make, they are not exotic, that's the point. They are ordinary, and they are the kind of things societies have decided about every powerful technology before this one. Which is exactly why the inevitability story works so hard to keep them off the table. At the level of institutions, the questions are not science fiction. Who captures the enormous wealth these systems generate? The workers whose data trained them, or the 5 balance sheets that own them? When a company automates a role, does it owe anything to the person displaced or nothing? Should the most capable models be deployed into the economy first and questioned later, or the reverse? Every one of those is a genuine fork in the road. Every one has been decided, in effect, by default, because a decision left unmade is still a decision. And right now it is being made by whoever moves fastest and owns the most, not by the people who will live inside the result. And at the level of your own life, there is a quieter choice. and it is entirely yours. It is the decision about which of your capacities you are willing to keep and which you are willing to surrender for convenience. Nobody is coming to protect your ability to think, to write, to sit with a hard problem, to be a real friend to another person. Those are not going to be defended by a company whose model improves the more you depend on it. If they are kept at all, they will be kept the way they were always kept, on purpose, through the difficult, unrewarded practice the machine so gently offers to take off your hands. Not because the tool is evil. It isn't. A great many of the things this technology can do are genuinely extraordinary, and a wiser world will use them for exactly that. But there is a difference between using a tool and being slowly organized by it. Between writing your own symphony, painting your own canvas, building your own thing for what it does to you, and quietly outsourcing the growth that would have made you more, not less. That difference is not decided by Silicon Valley. It's decided by you, in 1,000 small moments that no headline will ever record. So let's end where we began, with that sentence that sounds like weather. Nobody can predict this. We can now hear it for what it is. Not a confession of humility, but the most useful sentence the most powerful industry in the world has ever been handed. Because if nobody can predict it, nobody has to answer for it. If it's a wave, no one chose it. If it's inevitable, there's nothing to vote on. But we've spent the last hour taking the sentence apart. And underneath it, we found none of the things a force of nature has. We found a timeline set by the people selling the product. We found a displacement already underway at the bottom of the ladder. We found the money, about 5 names, betting more than any enterprise in history, precisely because the outcome is not assured. We found robots with a shipping schedule, and a chief promoter admitting on the record that they don't really work yet. We found a rhetoric engineered to move a boardroom's decision into the sky where no one can be blamed for it. And we found a cost that lands on you before any job is lost. None of that is weather. All of it is choice. Which means the future is not something that is happening to us. It is something being done by specific people for specific reasons on a specific schedule, while the rest of us are told there is nothing to decide. There is one question that cuts through the entire story. It is not whether the machines are coming. Perhaps they are. It is the question the word inevitable exists to prevent you from asking. Who voted for this? Nobody did. It was never put to a vote. And the first step to changing a future is the simple, stubborn refusal to believe it was already written. If this gave you a way to see the story that the headlines don't, that's exactly why this channel exists. We trace the forces that shape the world and get called inevitable, so that fewer of them get to stay hidden. If you want to keep seeing them, subscribe. Hit the like button. On this channel, that's not vanity. It's the mechanism that decides whether the next investigation reaches someone whose job is quietly on the list. And share this with one person who's been told, little too confidently, that the future is already decided. The next film traces another force nobody voted for, and I'll see you there.